Then There's California, a podcast featuring members of the California State Senate Democratic Caucus in conversation about their lives, their legislative priorities, policies, and other related issues that help make California exceptional. From the state capitol in Sacramento, I'm Brian Green. The 2023-2024 state legislative session was convened on Monday, December 5th. But even before the gavel went down on the latest two-year Senate and Assembly term, advocates and historians and pundits and the press were already proudly proclaiming this new session as history-making, one that positions the legislature to further look like and identify even more with the state of California demographic that it represents. The legislature will have at least 10% LGBTQ representation for the first time. The roster of Latino legislators, an increasing number of Asian Americans will be representing their communities across the state, and the number of female lawmakers could be as many as 51. One of those female lawmakers making a little bit of herstory herself in this new session is the newly elected state senator from California's 8th Senate District, representing Sacramento and cities like Alverta and Natomas to the north of the capital, and the town of Elk Grove in the south, after having survived one of the most high-profile and expensive elected office races in the state. Freshman State Senator Angelique Ashby has been a Sacramento City Council member for more than 10 years, representing the city's 1st District, and also served as vice mayor. Angelique Ashby is affectionately known in local circles here as the mom from Natomas, that city to the north, because her personal story is both familiar and inspiring to many in Northern California who have followed her local government leadership. Being a single mom at age 20 and getting her undergrad degree and law degree here in Northern California while raising her son on her own, living on food stamps and in affordable housing and depending on subsidized child care. But Ms. Ashby was a community volunteer and advocate early on, and after graduating law school, she opened a small business with her father, serving the local community, and when she was elected to the Sacramento City Council in 2010, she saw the urgency of prioritizing affordable housing, bringing jobs and bountiful employers to the area, addressing issues related to flood control and homelessness. For a large part of her city council term, she was the only woman member of the council. And keeping up her track record of firsts, she is now the first woman in more than 2 decades to represent Sacramento in her Senate seat. So on this edition of Then There's California, we'll get to know this Senator mom from Natomas, how she's transitioning her public policy platform from locally centric issues to dealing with challenges and opportunities affecting the entire state, the history and her story that she and her new legislative colleagues are creating, and what's on her agenda for this new session as a freshman state senator. Senator Angelique Ashby, welcome to Then There's California, and welcome to the Senate.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Senator Ashby kind of has a nice ring to it.
I don't know, I'm still getting used to it. Most of the time I think they're talking to somebody else.
Well, from what I've heard you say before in different interviews, being a 20-year-old single mother, college student, serving an elective office, thinking of that at the time, particularly at the state level, wasn't really on your horizon, right?
That was
Especially
not.
To have 2 governors, a former beloved one and a current elected one, saying, we want you here.
Yes, it was. It's been quite a ride. You're right. At 20 years old, when I had my first son and was just navigating those social service networks that provide help to so many, it was probably about the furthest thing from my mind that I would someday have the opportunity to be in the California State Senate. What an amazing journey to get here.
And here you are, a freshman state senator, already making history collectively and individually. Tell us about this new class of 2023 that you are now part of, that you're getting to know, and the faces and the stories that are now more accurately reflecting California as a whole, and how it will make a difference.
I would love to tell you about them. What an incredible group. California chose some incredible people for this incoming group. Senator Padilla, for example, out of Southern California, lives in Chula Vista, a former mayor. He's held a lot of local level positions. He was a detective. He's part of that growing LGBTQ caucus you talked about. He's wonderful. Aisha Wahab, a former foster youth. How amazing. She's an incredible person putting together what I think will be fun. It'll be really fun to watch her. She's putting together quite the career. She comes out of local governance in Hayward, and she is the daughter of Afghan refuge her father was killed. Her mother died young. That's how she ended up in foster care. And how fun to watch her. Senator Blake Spear, she's amazing. She's really intelligent, a great mom. I got to meet her husband. He's wonderful. Her husband and my husband both work in healthcare, so they hit it off. There are a lot of incredible people in this incoming class. Lola Smallwood out of L.A., what a firecracker. She's going to be great. She might be one of the nicest people I've ever met. So, yeah, it's an interesting time in the legislature, and I'm really proud to be a part of this freshman class. It's full of people that I think are going to make a big difference in the state of California.
Wow, you gave just this amazing overview of all of your colleagues. And
there are more of them that are incredible, too. Those are just off the top of my head.
Well, in fact, representation is power, as they say,
yes,
right?
So there are 6 new women in the class. There are 7 women that were elected, but 2 of them are returning. So there are 6 new women. And that means we are numbers 58 through 63 in the California State Senate. So I'm the 59th woman to ever serve in California State Senate, which is pretty fun.
Wow, that's humbling statistic if you think about it. But
yeah, Alex Vassar helped me figure that out. What a historian he is. I messaged him. I've been looking and trying to, I'm the 12th woman to serve on the Sacramento City Council. And so I was trying to figure out what number I would be for the state senate. So it's been fun to get to know him. And
Alex is with the California State Library. He's a historian.
He is.
Yes.
Yeah, he's a historian. He's written a book, the whole chapter on women in the state senate. So
well, changes and ascension not just at the legislative level, but also at the local level in many cities. And I'll get your perspective on this, including L.A. And you were sworn in this week, almost a week later, here with former Congressmember Karen Bass, who is now the first woman mayor of Los Angeles and the only second black mayor of Los Angeles. And her ability to do all that she is going to try to do as being in charge of the second largest city in the U.S., it has a tremendous implication for California Democrats and for government. What do you say about that?
Well, and she's going to have an all-star cast helping her because there's an all-female county board of supervisors in L.A., and that's awesome, too. Those ladies are going to change the game. Here in Sacramento, you mentioned this in my bio, I was the only woman for 6 years, half of the time that I served on the council. But now the city council in Sacramento, our state capital, flipped to a majority female. So there are 5 women, and they take their oath of office tomorrow. 3 of them are my mentees. So what I think is that representation matters. And when one person kicks in a door and then pulls other women through, you start to see those changes coming about, and they move their way up too. Those ladies are not going to stay on the city council. Hopefully some of them will follow me into the state senate or into the assembly or wherever their hearts lead them, and pretty soon we'll have a female governor in the state of California.
Not to sound too quaint about the symbolism of all of this record setting, but there was an article in a local newspaper profiling you and some of your fellow women local government leaders in Sacramento and the impact that you're having. And the story noted that women aren't more worthy to lead because they are more nurturing or empathetic, but they are fit to lead because they persist against adversity, and they prevail. Nevertheless, she persisted.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I think that equal representation is really important and the goal. And the thing that makes women coming into office so astounding is that it's been so long and we've never hit those parity goals. So to see what we can do as a state or in these cities or these counties where women are given equal footing or where they gain it themselves, where they fight hard like I had to do through a pretty rough election to be the first woman in 20 years to represent my city and my region. In those instances, yes, you see an incredible amount of persistence out of those women. But once you get to the role of legislating, what I think most women do really well is organize their thoughts. You don't have to look any farther than the President Pro Tem herself, Toni Atkins. She is a textbook person for laying out a plan, pragmatically moving her way through it, and really being a legislator's legislator. She's a leader, but she's conscientious and careful, and she cares about the members. Those are things I think women do well.
I remember former State Senator Holly Mitchell told me one time, women can multitask a lot better than men, says the middle-aged white guy sitting across from you.
Especially moms. You have no choice.
Yes.
Right? That's just the way your life goes. If you can't multitask, you're not going to get very much done. You're going to be frustrated and upset. And so it's a survival tactic. If you weren't good at it before you had kids, you will be after.
Let's talk about that life of persistence that you've had. Let's go back a few years, pushing back against your own personal version of, I guess, if not adversity, at least some challenges. You're a native Sacramentan, is that right?
I am not. I was born in southern Oregon in Ashland, a little town called Ashland.
Yes.
But my family moved here when I was very young, so most people do think I'm a native. I've been here since I was 10. I went to the local high school, Sac High. I had a baby right afterwards, and I didn't ever really leave after that. I went to UC Davis, and I went to McGeorge Law School, which are both local schools.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a strong support system through everything that you went through, being a single mom, trying to balance school? Was there encouragement?
Yeah. So my parents were divorced, which made that a little bit challenging, but they were both very supportive. And I have an older brother who's supportive too. Throughout my life, my sort of constant and my hero has always been my father, who actually worked for the state. He helped lead foster care for the state of California, and was also at one point the child welfare director for San Diego. So to get to a question you'll probably ask me later about what I care about, foster care and child welfare is definitely one of them. That's my father's legacy. He passed away a couple of years ago, but I did have tremendous support, but not people doing the work for me. So I didn't come from a wealthy enough family to have the resources just given to me. I had to go find them myself, which is why I had to navigate food stamps and why I had to navigate subsidized childcare. It's why programs like Child Action mean so much to me, because Child Action is a program that helps you pay for childcare while you work or go to school. Without that, I wouldn't have my law degree, and I wouldn't have been able to work and take care of my son on my own. So that was a stopgap for me, and I think it's really important because there are a lot of people out there who would love to go to school or would love to work and promote into higher level positions, but have insecurity around childcare.
And somewhere in that process you met Zach, your husband, and the rest is familial history, as they say.
Yes, my husband is an emergency room trauma nurse. He works here in Sacramento at the downtown hospital Sutter, and he's about as far away from politics as you can possibly get. However, sometimes when folks have need for the emergency room, they meet him.
Sure, and that makes your frame of reference on healthcare issues in California even that much more authentic as well, right?
So two things in terms of healthcare. One, yes, my husband and his thoughts and feelings and observations of emergency care in the state of California. He is not shy about sharing. But two, I have about the largest healthcare shoes in the history of the United States to try to fill in Dr. Pan.
Yes, I was going to ask you about your predecessor who left a legacy.
Oh, boy, did he ever. And I feel the weight of that, let me tell you. I am not Dr. Pan, that's for sure, but I do quite value his contributions to this state and to my own community. He's a neighbor. He lives not far from me, and a friend. We've been friends since we ran together in 2010 when I ran for the city council and he ran for the assembly. You noted that people sort of affectionately called me the mom from Natomas. Well, they just called him the doctor.
Yes.
So we weren't supposed to win those races. We were a couple of unknowns, but we stuck together. We won. And then during his time in the state legislature, I served on the city council, and we worked together then as well, built quite the relationship. And he is really the person who convinced me to run for the state senate, believed in me, showed me it was possible, supported a woman to replace himself. In fact, he supported two of the incoming women. He supported me and Stephanie Wynn, who's the assembly member in AD 10 coming in the south half of this county. Dr. Pan is a real game changer. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met.
And I would dare say that you don't have to be Dr. Pan. It doesn't have to be
well, that's
you filling
thing, because I will.
Yeah.
There's no chance of that happening.
Because you're going to have your own frame of reference on so many things here in Sacramento.
There's no chance of me being Dr. Pan. But the good news for everyone out there that loves Dr. Pan is that I am good friends with him, and he's not shy about calling me. Thank goodness.
Good. So you'll have him in the pipeline for
I
counsel and advice.
definitely will. And I have another friend who helps me out quite a bit right now, who's the mayor of this city, Mr. Darrell Steinberg.
Yes.
Who formerly held a
Our former pro tem, yes.
pretty important role in this building. And I have leaned heavy on him in the last couple of weeks to help me with sort of getting my sea legs here as I enter the building.
So your backbench is filled with a lot of good input and counsel.
Yes, I have a good Rolodex for folks to help me out and give me good guidance and advice.
So you were elected to the city council in 2010, and as you mentioned, it was a man's world at the local level. Even a decade plus ago, the local government diocese, that wasn't atypical. But then you also had role models and mentors in local government and outside that were women too, right?
I did. A really wonderful lady named Betsy Marchand is my mentor. She's older now and lives in a care facility, but she was the first woman ever elected to the Yolo County Board of Supervisors, and also the first elected that I ever really knew or worked for. And I didn't work for her in her elected capacity. We worked together at a foster youth organization where we were doing government work for them, meaning looking at how policies and procedures that were adopted would impact foster youth or the care of foster youth, particularly those in group homes. And to me, she was just so inspiring. I loved being around her. I still love being around her. The way she just believed that things could change, that things could be better, this optimism that just kind of rises out of her spirit was contagious. And I think I wanted to be like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned that you were the first city council member to have a baby while in office.
Yeah, I like to tell people not actually in my office.
Yes.
But I was elected to office.
Right.
Yeah, I ran a council I was vice mayor.
While in office in the general term,
while in office can be a little misleading. Yeah, I can think of no better way to say it, but so it still remains.
Well, you have a husband who's a healthcare official,
I do.
So he could have been there.
I suppose it's technically possible, but thank goodness that's not the way it went down. I was vice mayor at the time. Kevin Johnson was our mayor. He wasn't a person who attended a lot of the council meetings. He relied on me to carry a lot of those. So I ran a council meeting on a Tuesday night, and I gave birth on a Thursday morning.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow.
And it was Mother's Day weekend, so for whatever reason, the media here thought it would be just a great story to come to the hospital room and videotape me right after I had her. Not my favorite B-roll footage.
Yes.
But
that part of it wasn't in the original job description.
No, that was other duties as assigned parent.
Well, hopefully you have had the chance to get to know Senator Monique Limon of Santa Barbara, who, when she had her daughter Gianna back in the fall of 2020, right after she was elected to the Senate, she became the first woman senator in 20 years to have a child while being a state senator. And Senator Limon and I have talked about the pleasure and honor of making that senator mom distinction a little less an exception to the rule. And she also told me that she acknowledges that she shares this fragile balance of career and motherhood and finding childcare and prioritizing work and parenting, and the days when she knows she has it all together and the days when she doesn't have it all together. And she shares that with millions of women in the state. Yeah. And do you feel that kinship as well?
Yes. Well, first of all, Senator Limon has the office next to mine, and I look forward to swapping mom stories with her. I know exactly how she feels. Some days, by the time you get to work, you've already run a marathon of getting kids to school and getting lunches made, and you think, I've really got it made, and then you get in your first meeting and find a clump of oatmeal in your hair. So, or you reach in your pocket and there's a, Pokemon toy. It's all about a balance. And I have so much respect for the legislators with young children because they are really working hard for this state to find that balance between traveling from their home regions to this state capital. And that's hard. Mm-hmm. That's really hard to do. You miss things. I've missed plenty of T-ball games and parent-teacher conferences, and I'm sure they have too. And that's hard, but you love your state, you love your district, you want to be available, and you're always trying to spread yourself across a multitude of priorities. And so these moms and dads who are finding that balance and serving their state deserve, a tremendous amount of respect.
Well, continuing this Get to Know Angelique Ashby conversation, I mentioned some of the areas of need in the Sacramento area that you focused on over your 12 years at the local government level. Share some of your greatest hits, if you will, your points of impact as a city council member.
Well, there are quite a few. I tend to be a lover of the libraries. It's kind of one of my claims to fame. I passed a couple of measures that saved our libraries in Sacramento. We were going to have to close 3 of them. Unfortunately, in some of the most at-risk neighborhoods where those services are the most needed, that's one of my favorite things. I recruited a Fortune 500 company to our region, which doesn't happen very often, and they brought 5,000 high-wage jobs. That was a big deal. I recruited a hospital to replace my old sports arena in my district, which was a big deal. I built 10 parks, passed a couple of school bonds, built 4 new schools. And then I built the city's only Olympic aquatics facility, which is pretty extraordinary. It's a $50 million, really nice aquatics complex that folks from all over Northern California come to use for competitions. All things that I'm really proud of. And then, I worked on ethics and good governance. I worked on public safety. I put body cameras on our police officers, passed Breonna's Law, handled the Black Lives Matter 8 that can't wait being implemented in the city of Sacramento with my colleague, Councilmember Carr. On the good governance and ethics issues for the city of Sacramento, I worked with some folks from Common Cause, including Nicholas Hydorn, who some people may know that listen to this broadcast, and the League of Women Voters, and the Fair Political Practices, and we put together the most sweeping set of reforms of any city in the state of California to basically have sunshine ordinances and create really strong connections between the media and what's happening in the building and the public. So these portals of information. So those are some of the areas that I focused on. Diversity and equity, of course, was a big one for me. I created the Office of Diversity and Equity for the city of Sacramento, which is fantastic because part of their role is to address the bias in the hiring and promotion process in every department across the city. I worked with the McKinsey Global Institute and Lean In to look at how women are performing in the workplace. The city of Sacramento was the first governmental entity included in that study after we fought hard to have them included so that we could look at how women are doing in government, not just in C-suites in private corporations. So those are some of the areas I focused over the last 12 years. And then, of course, trying to pour into young people who could then replace me and others on that council, which is something I'm really proud of. I also created a youth action corps of about 1,000 kids per year, turns over every year, mostly seniors in high school, that participate in my community. Could be planting trees, could be policy work, could be helping me fight for that aquatics facility. But thousands and thousands of kids have come through that program, and I can't even begin to tell you the sense of pride you feel as each of them graduates from these colleges or sends you pictures of their weddings.
Sure.
It's incredible.
Well, you've done an incredible amount of work in the 10-plus years you were on the council at really an extraordinary time in Sacramento's history and California's history. And I know City Hall is in Sacramento, is just a few blocks up from the Capitol.
3 blocks away. That's what I tell them all the time.
That's right.
I'll be 3 blocks away. I'm not moving.
With
away.
a much bigger constituency, I guess you could say.
Yeah,
but,
a little bigger.
Yeah. Well, people know Sacramento, of course, if they don't know it well, they know it just from the big Golden Dome. We're the capital city for its easy access to San Francisco and Lake Tahoe. But for those who may not know the nuances of its communities and the people in them, profile it for us. Walk us through your 8th district and maybe explain the needs and distinctions here of the 8th district and how they mirror or are distinctive from the rest of the state.
Well, Senate District 8 has one big city, Sacramento, and then one medium-sized city, which is called Elk Grove, which is actually pretty big. It's about 250,000 people. And then it has some parts of the unincorporated county, including 2 towns, one called Rio Linda and one called Alverta. Rio Linda and Alverta are largely rural or farm-based, and while they are very close to the city of Sacramento, the lifestyle in those communities is pretty different than what's happening in your urban core. So if you look at each person's Senate district, mine is pretty compact because it's a high density in a small area, but the quality of life is vastly different across Senate District 8, which is one of the things I'm trying to keep a keen eye on. I don't think the school districts are equal. I don't think the public safety is equal. I don't think the access to food or healthy food like farmers markets or outdoor spaces is particularly equal, or to public transportation. So there's a lot of work to be done there on infrastructure, on quality of life, on health and access and equity. It's an extremely diverse community. Sacramento is known for being a place where refugees settle, refugees from everywhere.
Right.
So the diversity in language and background and culture is phenomenal. By the way, also one of my favorite things about representing and living in Sacramento, because the culture here is so rich. You can be at a Hmong event learning all this culture and seeing all this beauty, and then go to a Tinan, which comes from sort of the Sikh world, and it's just all these women celebrating their culture, and the things that follow are food and fashion and entertainment, and all of it is just an incredibly rich life that you can have in this area. And Sacramento, unlike other parts of the world, but even other parts of California, is very integrated. There aren't like neighborhoods really that have one culture over another. Each neighborhood, we used to argue on the city council all the time for which one of us has the most diverse district. The reality is they're all diverse. Elk Grove is diverse. Each part of Sacramento is very diverse. And I think that's because of how compacted it is, and just this, it used to be more segregated, but it is not. It is very integrated now, which is, I think, a good thing.
Well, moving from city council to the Senate, as we mentioned at the outset, your Senate race was one of the most high profile in the election season and one of the most expensive. And it is not the mission of this podcast to adjudicate elections and races, but I will ask.
We leave that to the voters.
Yes. Was there anything about the experience of this just concluded campaign that specifically focused your lens or further framed or impacted your perspective on the legislature and public policy priorities for your first year coming in? Let's put it that way.
That's a big question. So I would say the campaign was a rough one. It was really hard. It was very negative. And let's talk about gender representation. I think a lot of people watch a race like mine, which was definitely the title match in this region, and they think, I'm never going to run for office if that's what it looks like. And if somebody's going to distort photographs of me or call me names or say that I'm beholden to a group, then I'm not going to run. That's what I hate about negative campaigns. And throughout the race, I just kept praying, please let me win, because I don't want people to think that just running a negative campaign and calling people names and putting out ugly pictures of them means you'll win. Please don't let that be a successful tactic, because if that is a successful tactic, then good people are going to turn their back on leadership roles. And I do feel like the campaign that was less negative prevailed. And I think one great thing about Sacramento, great. I say great. This is a double-edged sword. It's a very political town. Yes. Because this is a government town. I always say second only to Washington, D.C.
Yes.
And so everybody here knows somebody in government and politics. They all do. The number one employer is the state. So I think what they found was a more informed electorate that saw through those tactics. And that makes me happy. I feel like it was worth it. It was worth it to walk through that fire. If at the end of the day, not only did we win, but hopefully the resounding message left behind from this campaign is, if your intent is to run solely a negative campaign and try to tear down your opponent, you will lose. And that is not a winning strategy. If we achieved that in any form or fashion, then it was worth it.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
You come from local government, as many of your new freshman colleagues and your upper class members in the legislature. So you're blessed with this keen sense of the sometimes contrary and disruptive relationship between cities and counties and the state government that gives them the needed funding for programs or mandates them to do something without giving them the needed funding.
Yes.
From your vantage point as a city council member for the last decade plus and now becoming a senator, has that local government-state relationship been a blessing or a curse? Well, and how can it be made different or better?
So half of the time that I've been on the city council, our mayor has been the former pro tem of the Senate. So that's helped a bit.
Yes.
with some of those, mandates that weren't funded, where we went back and said, how would you like us to do this. I do think that the legislature has a responsibility to at least consider the obligations they're placing on local governances. So in the end, you may decide, I know we didn't fund this and it's an unfunded mandate and you're going to have to do it, but it is so important that we're putting it out there. That just may very well happen. What I hope to do in this building is be at least one of the voices who says, let's talk about that though. Because if you put this unfunded mandate on top of another unfunded mandate on top of another unfunded mandate at the same time that we're doing the things that we're doing with PERS, you're really creating a lot of liabilities for cities. And while big cities like Sacramento or LA or San Francisco or San Diego may be able to figure it out, smaller cities are really going to struggle with this. And I just think those conversations need to happen. It's not to say that we would never issue another unfunded mandate, but it is to say when you do that, it needs to really be an incredibly important public good that you're trying to achieve.
Well, as we're talking about this, it reminds me just recently of the tension between the state and local governments. Governor Newsom rejected every homeless plan in the state a month or so ago, holding up hundreds of millions of dollars of funding with the demand that local leaders do more to move people off our streets.
Yes.
I know you and your colleagues on the council, Mayor Steinberg, have been dealing with this incredible homeless problem here in Sacramento. But did that forceful show me the work effort from the governor, did that put you in an awkward situation?
No, because let me tell you about a big success that Governor Newsom did that helped right here in Sacramento. Project Home Key.
Right.
This is the governor's baby. He says, you want to buy a hotel? We'll help you pay for that hotel, but you show us how you're going to stand that hotel up as longer term housing, even if it's just interim, but where there will be wraparound services and people will be successful when they're coming in off the streets. So I did one of these programs.
Right.
I picked a Staybridge Suites in my council district, which was very nice. It's a nice area of the city. It's a new hotel. It wasn't cheap to buy, but it has kitchens and in some instances separate bedrooms, which means I could put families in there. And I prioritized children. So if you have a child and you're homeless, you're a high priority for this. It's 110 units. And we would not have been able to stand that up and open it. And by the way, it took us less than a year to purchase it, renovate it, get a provider, link it up with the voucher program through our Housing and Redevelopment Agency so that each family that comes in, let's say a mom comes in with 2 kiddos, there's wraparound services. It's a great school district. There's social workers that go back and forth between the school district and the facility. She's getting as much help as she can. She's going to deal with whatever mental health, trauma, domestic violence issues she walked through the door with. The children are going to get those supports. But a voucher is also applied to her. So let's say 9-10 months, she's pretty stable and she's ready to move into her own apartment. The voucher goes with her. And so she's able to transition into her own less intensive program or home, and then the room becomes available for the next. And another voucher is assigned to the next mom or mom and dad that come in that space, or dad or dads or moms or whoever it is that has small children. And so this program is strong, and it is run by a nonprofit, and there's a for-profit involved too. And then the governor's component for Home Key and the city and the Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Agency. So you put all of those components together with the school district as a partnership, you really have a successful model. So no, I don't begrudge the governor for saying to the states, we can do more and better. He's seen examples of it, and I think what he's saying is it's not good enough to just build shelters and move people off of the streets and into shelters. It doesn't solve for the problems. We have a drug addiction problem. We have a mental health problem. We have trauma problems, domestic violence problems. And until and unless we get at the root of those issues, we're not really dealing with the underlying causes of homelessness. We're just putting people in buildings. And in some instances, putting people in buildings can make it worse. We've had a lot of problems in some of those triage facilities where there aren't resources, where it's not set up well, where they're overly inundated. Of course, keeping people safe and indoors when it's cold or indoors when it's hot is a basic principle that we all need to get to, but that's really respite. That's not service. It's not housing. So I actually am proud of him for saying to the cities, give me something stronger.
Well, speaking of that, and you're right, I am going to ask you about some of your priorities here at the state capitol. You've mentioned a few of them already, but let's expand on those and some others. I know budgetary issues, further investment in the Sacramento region, affordable housing. Let's talk about some of that, and also any specific legislation you have already brought to the desk that you're introducing within the week.
I haven't introduced one yet, but I'm doing lots of research around what I'd like to start with. I can tell you, I mentioned to you earlier that my dad worked in the child welfare space. I sort of have it in my head that I'd like to start with something that would be in honor of his memory. But yeah, there are some things around good governance that I'm interested in, certainly around child welfare. I'm very interested in housing and homeless strategy. I also always have a keen eye on women and children. Child care is a big deal for me. I think you can expect to see me entering into those areas. I understand that Sacramento's been a leader in health care for a long time, so I'll do the best I can to keep that drumbeat going for Dr. Pan and for his supporters. You know, people that work in the state of California often live in Sacramento, so there are a lot of people who live here who are affected by the decisions made around the structure of governance here. So I think those are things you'll see me probably engaging in as well. And, you know, you heard me talk a little bit about some of the projects I care about in Sacramento,
yes.
Things like libraries and transportation and housing. And, you know, I lived in low-income housing here in Sacramento. It's important to me. And I do think that the state needs to participate at a greater clip with these local governances in providing low-income housing, and particularly where there's a requirement for wraparound services. And, hey, you got a governor begging you for plans on how to help people who are housing insecure. So let's give him some ideas.
One thing I know that Dr. Pan did not have to deal with, at least the last few years, that you and your colleagues may have to now, a potential recession is looming. California is already estimating a $25 billion budget deficit this next year that could, at a minimum, curb some of the recent spending increases for some of these essential safety net programs that you're talking about right now. What's your perspective on the budget going into this?
I would love to have come in 4 years ago and been a part of that. I think I'm probably a good person to be here at this time. I have lived a life where money has mattered and been scarce. So as a former single mom who used food stamps while I was, going to college and living in low-income housing, I understand how important it is to be measured with your resources. And I think it's my instinct to be very careful about money and about creating long-term obligations and what that does, not just to individuals, residents, and constituents, but also to governance and to stability. And so I might be the right person for that time. Mm-hmm. But in the city of Sacramento, being a good steward of those resources was rewarded with a very positive budget in my last years. So I'm hoping that at least history repeats itself and that it is a short run of a recession where we maybe right-size some things and then have the opportunity to rebuild.
Well, we've learned a lot of lessons in the last decade or so, so I can't imagine it would be near as bad as what your mayor here in Sacramento, Darrell Steinberg, had to deal with as a Senate leader and as budget chair in the Assembly as well.
He really was dealt a tough, because the times that he was doing that here, we were doing the same at the city, and boy, was that rough with no help. And so, hopefully we find our footing and we right-size what needs to be corrected and then rebound quickly, as California so often does.
I want to focus real quick on one of these elements that could be affected by the budget is the outreach and the support for foster children, which I know is a passion for you. It was a passion for your dad. One of your colleagues here in the Senate, Senator Dave Cortese, has been a leader in this effort to establish a pilot project across the state to provide cash assistance of $600 to $1,000 a month to transition-age foster youth.
Yes.
And he has championed that as a local official himself in Santa Clara County before he came to the Senate. He also has new legislation this session that he's introduced to give vulnerable youth the ability to stay in the foster care system until the age of 26.
Yep.
Now, I don't want to put you here on the spot to make judgments about your colleague's legislation first week.
I've read them both.
But at first glance, what do you think of it?
I've read them both. I've spoken with the Child Welfare Directors Association about both. I've spoken with Senate staff about both. I haven't spoken with the senator yet. In fact, I haven't met the senator, but I will, and I will talk to him about it. Both are noble goals and noble causes. And look, a lot of times when you're making decisions about resources, you need to decide whether a dollar spent here will save you $5 here. You asked me not 2 minutes ago about housing insecurity and dealing with homelessness.
Yes.
One of the largest populations to suffer housing insecurity
is foster
are
children.
former foster youth.
Yes.
If we give them a universal basic income, I know it's a pilot project now and doesn't run across the whole state, but it's not that expensive. And if you did it, the amount of savings you would have from not dealing with individuals who've been traumatized by being street-level homeless is extraordinary. So I really think there is a balance to be had by looking at some of our most vulnerable populations before preventatively, before they hit street-level homelessness and feel driven to either not get their medications for mental illnesses or turn to drugs to self-medicate or experience the many traumas that happen on the street. They already have a fairly traumatized life from what has happened during their childhood for a variety of reasons. I do not think it is outlandish to take children as far as COBRA takes children on health care in terms of their age. And I do not think it is outlandish to look at a universal basic income for children who are basically wards of this state to get them on balance, like we would do for our own children as they go through college. You might notice these ages coincide with the natural ages that our own children are pretty dependent on their parents.
Yes.
I think he's wise to at least be having that dialogue, introducing those concepts and ideas. And for me, maybe this is because I'm a mom. Maybe it's because my dad was the head of foster care in this state. Maybe it's because I was a single mom who was poor. But I think there are very few things that are more important than taking care of our kids in this state. I do not think there should be homeless children. I do not think foster youth should suffer. We live in the richest state, in the richest country in the world. We ought to be able to take care of our kids.
I celebrate your passion on this.
Thank you.
What committees are you hoping
This is the $1 million question.
Tell California what you wanted to serve on.
Here's the thing. They asked us to list out a few that we might be interested in, and then we were told carefully, you're not going to get all of these, just so you know. It's just to make sure you get one or two that you might enjoy being a part of. I'm hoping to be a part of the budget one way or another, mostly because I think learning the budget and setting a budget is really important for learning and setting priority goals for a state. So if I don't get that this time around, maybe I'll get it next time around. Hopefully I get a couple go-rounds here. I'm interested in anywhere that I can be in a role that helps with investment. And I think there are several committees and commissions that look at investment. Energy is one that looks at investment. GNO looks at investment. The Business and Professions looks at investment. I really like to draw down resources. I like to build partnerships and collaborations. I like to bring in private sector with the government. I've had some success in doing that in the past at the local level. I told you about a $50 million aquatics facility. $20 million of that came from developer fees that we charge developers to work and build in the region that they were happy to do because it created this wonderful amenity that enhance the value of their projects as well. But that kind of public-private partnership can help spread scarce dollars farther during tough times. So I'd like to be in some positions where I could potentially help address some of those things. I have a law degree, so I know that makes me a candidate for judiciary, and that seems fun too. Seems like a good committee.
Well, it's possible with all the transitions that happen around here, you could find yourself chairing one committee sooner than you might think, especially with your portfolio from local government.
Local government background. Maybe I'm happy to, as I told the pro tem, put me where I'm the most useful to you in the state of California, and I will try my best to figure out how to be helpful.
One final thought here as we close. You mentioned earlier, you didn't go into details, but you have mentors already here in the Senate. Who are they? Tell us about them.
I have some friends in the Senate. It's been interesting. Susan Rubio is someone I've known, her and her sister Blanca Rubio. Holly Mitchell was a fantastic mentor to me or friend to me in the campaign, and somebody I turned to. Called her before I stepped foot in the building and said, before I even step in there, tell me what I need to know. Nancy Skinner, Senator Skinner, who runs the Women's Caucus, is somebody I'm interested in getting to know a little bit better. I've had several members reach out to me, Senator Laird, Senator McGuire, who has endless energy. I'm interested in tapping into his strong convictions for lifting everyone up. There are a lot of good people. What I want California to know is I'm getting to know some of these folks you've selected. You have chosen wisely. There are a lot of really wonderful people serving in the California State Senate. They care deeply.
Well, it sounds like you're one of them, too.
I hope so.
Cannot think of a better way to wrap this conversation up. Thank you for your time. It's nice to meet you. I wish you luck for this next session, and good luck finding your place and finding your space and getting your policy priorities out there to the world. Yeah. And as you make those policy priorities a reality, you always have a space here on this podcast to come and flesh it out and talk about it.
Yeah, I love it. I'm working to find my sea legs here, but it's a lot, and I'd be lying to you if I didn't say it's overwhelming. It certainly is. It's exciting and terrifying all at once, and I'm hopeful that I can be an effective and impactful senator in the time that I get to spend serving the state of California.
And I know we will see that. Thank you, Angelique Ashby, for joining us. The mom from Natomas herself, freshman state senator Angelique Ashby of Sacramento, California's 8th Senate District.
That wraps this edition of Then There's California. We are proud to have technical and production assistance and great ideas from Martin Ashley, Bob Brulte, Brian Shadden, Ann DeGrazia, John Roman, Lisa Murphy, McLeana Woods, and the graphic artistry of Tim Davis. I'm Brian Green from the state capitol in Sacramento. Thanks for listening to Then There's California.